This video contains subject matter that may be offensive and disturbing to some people. If you are the type to require a warning throughout a video or show, let this message serve as your warning. This channel discusses the harsh reality of true crime. If this warning is not sufficient for you, consider a different genre and unsubscribe from my channel immediately.
All right, everybody, there's no music this time, but here are all the amazing people involved in the East Haven Jane Doe case from 1975, right? So it's we got Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick from Identifinders International. She's been on many times. Maryann, Collette, the sister of Patricia Newsom, who is identified. She was the East Haven Jane Doe, and then also Captain Joseph M. Murgo. I guess he's at the East Haven Police Department, so it works out great. So it's been a pretty amazing story. Colleen was telling me about it the other day, and I was like, "Oh man, we gotta get them on so they can tell the story." And so, you know, just recently, what date did you guys come out in the news? Wasn't it just like a week ago or something, or ish? Maybe a month, I don't know.
April 24th, I think.
Okay, yeah, so not too long ago, maybe 11 days ago or so.
A couple of weeks, yeah.
Yeah, so Tricia Newsom is the individual that was identified after all these years, so they're going to tell the story of how it all came to fruition. So Marianne's going to start us off. Hello, Marianne. Down in the left-hand corner, that's her sister in the middle there, and she's going to tell us a little bit about Tricia and then how she ended up in the, what are those called? The boarding school, and then what happened to her, like did she leave with a friend or how that all worked out. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about her.
I sure can. I'll tell you what I remember. Patricia's my older sister, obviously. We had two brothers as well, and my father and mother, of course. My mother died in 1968. And at that time, my father, you know, he had 4 children. What do you do at that time? And he remarried about a year later. After he remarried, we were moved from Philadelphia, where we had lived on Thuron Avenue, to Morganville, New Jersey. Ostensibly because, you know, it was a really nice big house, big property next to, you know, a nice farm. At that time, though, all contact with my mother's family was stopped. And Patricia being a little older, my oldest brother had gotten married right at 72. And so he wasn't living at the home. When we moved to Morganville, it was Patricia, our brother Peter, who was 2 years younger than her, myself, and my half-brother. Because my father had remarried and he and his wife had a baby. He's awesome. I love him. Well, things with Patricia weren't going very well in the family. What I was told was she was causing problems with the other children. So she was sent to boarding school. I've tried to find out exactly where she was sent to boarding school. I was told Monticello, but I was also told that there was more than one boarding school, that she had made friends with somebody whose family lived in Maine, and it was her understanding that my sister had gone off with this girl to live with this girl's family. And I never saw or heard from my sister again. Unfortunately, it was a situation where my father died in 1980. They had divorced previous to his passing away. And at the time of the divorce, I was left with my stepmother. So we moved again after that. And so that just made it harder. Her name wasn't taken kindly if her name was mentioned. We're just going to put it that way. And so I've just pretty much been looking for her since then.
When was the first time you thought, wow, I better look to find her? Was it 1980 something as when you're a little bit older, or when did that start?
The minute I was 18, I was always looking. I was always trying to look. The minute the internet came along, it was like, wow, now maybe I can find her. I had her social security number. I just knew after a while that if she was alive, I would have found her. There's just no question that I would have found her. And I just knew that you just know. And my stepmother was basically had said, well, she was smart. She'll be okay. And, yeah, she was very smart. But she was also, young. She was only 18 years old. She's 18 years old for 3 weeks when they found her in that ditch. She never had a chance to live her life. I have no idea what she was doing in East Haven, Connecticut. I just pray that there's somebody out there that knew her, that went to school with her, anywhere out there in the Northeast. Somebody had to have known her. She was a happy person. She was a hippie. She wore, the pretty dresses with the sunflowers and the platform. If you could keep shoes on her, she preferred not to have them on. She liked the rain. She was my sister. She was my hero. I wanted to be like her.
Yeah. Well, and then there's an article. I found one of these articles that came out. So it says right here, a bound body found in ditch in East Haven. This is 1975, August 17th. A body wrapped from head to toe in a tarp and bound tightly with wire was found Saturday morning in a drainage ditch near Bradley's department store on Frontage Road, police said. Police said they were notified by a truck driver who spotted the body about 10 a.m. while making a delivery at the rear of the department store. The body apparently had been in a drain pipe for about a week, according to police Lieutenant Walter Heck. Heck said the body apparently was washed out of the pipe by heavy rains. Heck said police do not know what sex the body is. The body wrapped as found was taken to a medical examiner Saturday. Asked if the death may have been gangland killing, Heck said it could be. At this point, I don't know what to think. So, obviously that's probably doesn't seem like that's what it was. What do you guys think? Doesn't feel like that, right?
I don't think so. Gray, thank you so much for.
Well, it's not for me to say, but.
Oh, go ahead. What was
that? I don't think it seems like that. I know that the organized crime was a lot more prevalent back then than it was today, especially in that particular area. So they couldn't rule out ties to organized crime, but I think as the investigation progressed, I think they started to rule that possibility out.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on, and you're sort of the law enforcement angle that made it all the wheels turn. So there you go. Right? Not even sort of. I shouldn't have used the word sort of. You are the law enforcement person that made it happen. So
yeah, we're just 3 or 4 generations later. Technology caught up, and this is definitely a case where you had to apply a certain level of technology to be able to make the progress that we did. So we're just so thankful to be able to have done that in this case. So
what's interesting is that Marianne, on her own, was looking for her sister, even on podcasts, and over the years, obviously it didn't start like that, but podcasts in the later years. And then you guys have, for decades, been trying to figure out who this person was. But obviously there was probably decades taken off spending time. It was, right? I mean, wasn't there big gaps in like really digging into it where eventually you guys looked at it again and then decided to, well, why don't you take it from there? You can. And by the way, while you're talking, I can still listen to you. I got to go turn off the audio on my other computer because it keeps blasting out stuff that's going on. Okay, so I can still hear you though. So I'm just going to walk over there. You start telling us how this all came together. All right, cool.
Of course. Yeah. So August 16th, 1975, a body of a unidentified female was found bound and gagged in a drainage ditch behind Bradley's department store. And the area is built up now, but back then in 1975, as you can imagine, there was a lot less people traveling the roads and just a lot less people in the town in general. So it was a quiet space, a place that was ideal probably at the time to dump a body, and that's where Patricia was found. She was found bound and gagged and wrapped up in a tarp. And, initial investigators, this was their case. In law enforcement, there's always that one case, right? There's always that one case that follows you throughout your career. And if you retire without solving it or without it coming to a resolution, it follows you for the rest of your life. And this is that case for a lot of investigators, in particular, retired Lieutenant Joe Izzo and retired Sergeant Bruce Scobie, who took it over in later years. This was that case that had always followed them, and they worked on it extensively at the time, especially in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And you're right, there was a large gap in between the 90s and I'd say the 2010s to recent times where there just wasn't anything to go on. There was no more leads to follow up on, and there just wasn't any more information coming in. So, at some point, and there had been a lot of conversations regarding this, at some point we knew that exhumation would be the next logical step, because we knew DNA had come so far, and the possibility of at least identifying her through DNA sequencing was a real possibility, but at first we only had a pubic bone, and we felt lucky at first that we at least had a pubic bone because we didn't know where she was buried. And she was Jane Doe to us for 47 years. And we knew she was buried in the State Street Cemetery in Hamden, Connecticut, but we knew she was buried in an unmarked grave. And the State Street Cemetery historically was known as a cemetery that buried transients and homeless people and people who otherwise didn't have anybody to claim their bodies. So we knew we were up against many challenges, and the first challenge that we encountered was finding her burial location in a cemetery full of unmarked graves. So
and it's kind of like right here, right in this area, basically at the end.
Exactly. But when we went in September of 2020, I believe myself and Captain Dave Emmerman, who we worked on extensively together, when we first visited that in 2020, it was all overgrown. So right about where your mouse is, right about that first driveway right there, that was all overgrown. It was all woods. And, we knew she was buried further in than where we could even access at the time. So
did you have a map of where she was placed or something, or?
No, so we didn't have a map. We had nothing. We had our friend Tony Grigo, who he just had a passion for the case from way before I was a part of it. And Tony's a retired New Haven police sergeant, and he really we couldn't have done it without him, but he really had a passion for the case, and he knew she was buried in the State Street Cemetery as well. And
well, how did you find that location in the cemetery, though? Like, what made you go to that part? Yeah.
So it was Tony. He brought us to that general location on September 4th of 2020. I called Tony and I said, myself and Captain Emmerman are at the State Street Cemetery. We have no idea where we're going, where we're looking, but we believe Jane Doe's body is buried somewhere here. And I kid you not, about 35 seconds later, Tony is pulling up into the driveway of the State Street Cemetery, and he brought us to that general location. He also didn't know exactly where she was buried, but it started with him bringing us to that southeast portion of the cemetery, and that's how it pretty much started from there.
It's pretty amazing. And I have dogs like other people, so they're probably going to bark. I don't know what the deal is, but every time I do a show, they just start barking at something. Let's see. Well, that's pretty amazing, though. So how was he aware of that spot, though? Did you explain that, or?
So the initial investigation, after it turned cold, and again, Patricia's body was up at the medical examiner's office for one whole year. So she was found on August 16th of 1975. She was at the medical examiner's office until May 28th of 1976. The East Haven Memorial Funeral Home took care of the burial arrangements and buried her there in May, at the end of May of 1976. So there was documentation that she was located in the southeast portion of the cemetery near a gate, but that was all we had to go on at the time. There were no actual measurements. There were no pictures. There wasn't any documentation on the day she was buried. So we had that extremely vague information that she was at that portion of the cemetery, but we hadn't even found that at that point. But somehow Tony knew that she was in that general area as well.
Okay, so then you find this area, and then what happens next?
So we find the area, and again, we had to knock down a lot of the brush because it was extremely overgrown. And again, we worked on this case extensively over the years, but we had so many other cases to work on as well. So with a full caseload and everything else, it took us about a year to really decide, okay, we're going to do this. What do we need to do to possibly reopen this case, get fresh eyes on it, and see what we can do, with the application of modern technology. So the first thing we did was present our case to the New Haven State's Attorney cold case unit. And we made a PowerPoint and we presented it to a bunch of investigators, including state's attorneys. And we pretty much told them the challenges that we were up against and the fact that we had no idea where she was actually buried. And we got the recommendation through that meeting to reach out to a company called Identifinders International. And we hadn't even located her. We hadn't even decided we were going to exhume her. But it was a Marianne, Connecticut police officer said, if you do locate her, please consider working with Identifinders International. They helped us out with a case in the past. Dr. Fitzpatrick is amazing. And I took her number and I gave her a call. I gave her very vague information on the internet website. It was just one of those forms that you fill out. And sure enough, she got back to me. So the decision was made to exhume her. And we, in 2022, and in June of 2022, well, I'll even back up a little bit further. We reached out and got in touch with the ex-cemetery director, who, again, the State Street Cemetery is no longer in operation. It's defunct, but the ex-cemetery director, through a Facebook campaign, agreed to come down and meet us at this cemetery. And he said that he didn't know exactly where she was buried, but he was confident that if he got eyes on the property again, he would be able to sort of direct us in to the right area. So one cold, rainy morning in 2020. We met him down there, and myself and a friend of mine, Joe Vitale. We went to the Hamden Town Clerk's office. And the Hamden Town Clerk's office is where all the burial records and public records and things like that are stored. So the ex-cemetery director told us that he was confident that if we were to read every single burial based off of the burial permits in succession, he'd be able to, based on the way the rows of the cemetery are, he'd be able to pinpoint exactly where our unidentified person was buried.
That's crazy.
That's what we did, and we spent all day at the town clerk's office. We were on the phone with him, and we read every single burial record from 1974 to 1976. We got to where the unidentified burial record was, and we pinpointed what we thought was Jane Doe's or Patricia's burial location. The other thing we were looking for is a metal Ziegler casket. And the Ziegler caskets, if I could describe them, are just non-ornate metal caskets. They almost resemble the type of casket where service members come back from the war with the flag draped over them. They almost resemble those types of caskets. And we believed at first that the casket we were looking for, metal casket, would be in a sea of wooden caskets in that area, because at the time it was more common to bury bodies in wooden caskets than it was in metal caskets. So when we found what we believed to be Patricia's burial location with a sounding rod, the cemetery director prodded down and touched on a metal casket. So that was our spot. We returned on June 8th of 2022 with a whole host of resources. Our East Haven Public Works, East Haven Memorial Funeral Home with a brand new casket, just in case we damaged the casket when we exhumed her. We had a pastor join us, State's Attorney's Office. So we had a whole host of resources, and we exhumed what we thought would be Patricia's casket. It turned out to not be Patricia's casket, and we were devastated. We were so sad. It was the casket of a young man, and as you can imagine, we were frustrated. We transferred him into the brand new casket that the funeral home provided, and we buried him again.
But does he have a name?
He doesn't have a name. He's
another one. I mean, it's crazy, right? I mean,
another individual that was buried in an unmarked grave. So unfortunately, we don't know the identity of that young man either. But the pastor held a vigil, and we buried him again.
Did you take any like a bone or anything just for maybe a future project for right here?
No, we did not. Again, it was out of our jurisdiction. Okay. We were mission driven to find Patricia, so we reburied him again. But we knew that we had to get back to the drawing board, because obviously our initial location was incorrect. So a week later we came back, and this time we came back with a employee from the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, and she brought a ground penetrating radar device. And the GPR is basically an X-ray machine on wheels, and she combed the area with the GPR. And what we found that day was even more discouraging, because we thought we would find a metal casket in a sea of wooden ones. We didn't think there would be too many really to choose from based off of the size of the location. But we found about 25 to 30 caskets buried in unmarked graves. God. And I mean, it was just mind blown. And the caskets were stacked on top of each other and buried. Caskets were, buried in close proximity, packed next to each other. So it was.
Is there any record of are these like a mass casualty event, or is this just where they put unidentified? You mentioned that earlier. It's just sort of a grave or a cemetery where unidentified people and or people with no income or whatever, or just buried there, right, or something, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Yes, there's definitely more to the story that I can't touch on, but that it was an unorthodox way of doing business, and
I see.
they had come under fire throughout the years because of the way they conducted themselves and did business. But yeah.
Sounds like something right out of Poltergeist. Remember that movie with all the coffins? I mean, it's just ridiculous. So all those people need to be. I mean, they need to be identified. As a result
of that day, we found what we thought to be. We pinpointed a better location and found the exact spot of Patricia, and the rest is history.
So even though there was all those other graves, somehow you found, or coffins, you found hers. Finally, and you get her out, and then what's the next process? Now you've got to get some material. Maybe that's where Colleen can jump in, right? With you were given probably some bone or something, or
we first talked to Joe. I mean, I had to look back. I mean, this is October 2020 was our first conversation, and I had to look back through the whole story because I had put in our case file, look back over the emails and the conversations we had. And it was, really interesting case because at first that pubic bone didn't produce hardly any DNA at all. Or is it right? No, it did, didn't it, Joe? But it was full of bacteria. That's what the problem was.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and also that was a key thing in identifying her because the person you found had a missing pubic bone, so that was a good clue, right? That it was her.
So we had two different clues because people have asked us, how did you know exactly that you found the right casket? Because again, we thought we were looking for one Ziegler casket in a sea of wooden ones, and when we did our research, there was many Ziegler caskets in a sea of other metal caskets. So there were two telltale signs that we found the correct body. One was the way she was wrapped in the casket. She was placed in the casket in the autopsy blanket or autopsy sheet that was common back then, after they conduct autopsies. And again, the second one was obviously the fact that she was missing her pubic bone. And that was determined by Michelle Clark from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, who joined us as well. So yeah, she was missing a pubic bone too.
That's crazy. I mean, all these little pieces of the puzzle coming together. So then what was the piece of bone that you took out of her to give to Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick to send off somewhere to get extracted, the DNA?
Yep. So we sent her the femur. If my memory serves me correct, we sent femur. That is an excellent source of DNA. And is presented as challenges as well because sending a human body part through FedEx is there's a lot of regulations in doing that, but we were able to get through the red tape and get that over to her. So
nice. So now you've got the femur, Dr. Fitzpatrick, right? So what goes on next?
Well, this was all really great because we had, like we said, the pubic bone really didn't give a lot of DNA. Well, it did we need 1 nanogram, whatever that is, right? And we really needed, we need 1. We got 3, and we thought we had it made in the shade, so to speak. But it was contaminated with a lot of bacteria. So when we started to quality check and stuff like that, we stumbled on the bacteria because some of the quality check at the lab looks at that, how much human versus other stuff. So that was pretty disappointing after all that. And so then, Joe again picked up. I mean, there's a lot goes on, we don't hear anything, but there's a lot going on. And then Joe re-emerged from, I'd say, the cocoon of law enforcement's decisions-making process. So Joe emerged again. And we discussed with him the exhumation that was going to happen. I didn't know about the first exhumation, but the second one, I think I kind of knew, but I didn't really know the details. And so then we had a discussion when they, retrieved Patricia's remains. When all that, one of the situations was that I believe this is correct, Joe. She was buried. She was frozen. I think that's right. And so her in the coffin was hermetically sealed. I mean, it was airtight. So the remains weren't in great shape, but they were okay. But there was some decision that had to be made on. There was tissue left. There were bones. There was a wisdom tooth that had been retained above ground. And I think that you told me that the tooth went to the lab and to the state lab. I think the femur went, but you got the femur back for us to use. Right. So the femur is one of the tooth and the femur were real good, are probably the best parts of the body to yield DNA. So we didn't have the tooth, but we sent the femur off. And in the meantime, the really great thing is that technology is developing. That's how we got here in the first place. And the technology happened. We had found a new lab up at Lakehead University in Canada that was doing advanced extraction. And when they got hold of the femur, of course, it's a much better bone, but also it's advanced. We got 32 nanograms instead of 3. And so that was a good day. It was like a high five day. We got plenty.
That's like a barrel full. What do you say, 32
nanograms? Yeah, it's like a 55-gallon drum of DNA ridiculous. To work with. I mean, and how often do you get that from, 50-year-old remains? This is really a really interesting development for us. I mean, we see, gnat's eyebrows worth of DNA, right, from 10, 20 years ago. But having so much DNA from such an old case was, it's a relief to us, because it means the risk level goes down the more DNA you have, because even if some of that's bacteria, you still have a lot left. And so then in the meantime, too, we found another lab out in the Atlanta area called Genealog, and we sent it out there. And that was also very, very good lab. We had worked with him 5 years ago, and then he came back in the picture again. So we really like him. We trust him. Well, we have all kinds of labs we work with, but we tried Genealog. Now, that's when it got kind of instantly interesting, because we had the bioinformatics done. We did whole genome sequencing. I think your fans are familiar with that. That means we just take an electronic copy of the DNA on our hard drive. It's like parallel to scanning a book, where you have all the letters of the book and the paragraphs and everything all sorted out, and it's electronic. So now you can do whatever you want with it. You can take pages out if you want, rewrite the whole thing. So we took the whole genome sequence. We had the guy come in with his software and pick out the markers we needed. And this was a low-risk case. We had plenty of markers, plenty of DNA, good shape, amazing good shape. And so then we put it into the right format for our database, GEDmatch. And, we put it up there. We were all excited. This has been a very old case, fingers crossed. So we uploaded it, and it usually takes about a day to kind of batch and get into the system. So I happened to be up late that night. Because I had a deadline and I had not done it right, so I'm up late doing these slides. And I hate to say it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. I don't want to do that all the time. I'm getting old here. And I said, what? I think I will just check to see if the data is batched into I just want to have a look at the matches, just kind of. And then I'll just get up in the morning and I'll talk to Linda Doyle, who was our genealogist on the case. And she's in New York, so she's 3 hours ahead of me, right? Now, Linda gets up early. I'm going to bed late. So I don't know Linda's already up working on this, all right? So I just click in, and I couldn't believe my eyes. There is Tricia's sister is the top.
What was the number? What was the, like, 1,500 or something? Or what was the...
Yeah, I forgot, like 20-something hundred, 2,000.
Yeah, wow.
I mean, I was like, Why doesn't it always happen that way? Come on. It took 2.5 years to get the DNA sorted out with these exhumations and these discussion in the pubic bone and the femur and all of this and the coffin and the guy trying to find where. I mean, this is crazy. And then it's an oh my God moment. It's worth it.
Those are like the quickest. You can solve those in 3 minutes. It's pretty much done the moment you open one that's a sister.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is Marianne over here, that's so incredible that she's looking for her sister and has the, unusual foresight actually to actually get a profile downloaded off of Ancestry or whatever, and then upload to GEDmatch, right?
That wasn't foresight.
Well, no, just thought, like.
Well, you did it.
Correct.
You did it.
A result of that Facebook group.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, you did it before. A lot of people still don't do that. They have missing family members. Yeah. They don't think of doing that. But if you're out there and you have anybody that's missing at all, and even if you don't, upload to GEDmatch so that you can help put these puzzles together a lot easier.
Yes, and Marianne, that's your mission. That's your mission as you go along in life now, is to tell people what happened and tell them to upload to GEDmatch. That is your mission.
Mission accepted. Absolutely.
Okay, carry on, soldier.
It's so cool, too, that, in the Facebook group, somebody was also aware of it. I mean, it's pretty common for, like, true crime people to know about GEDmatch and Ancestry. Ancestry, DNA, and the stuff that they're doing now is absolutely a game changer for cold cases specifically, and even new ones. But, I mean, most criminals now are smart enough to try to not interject their DNA into a situation, but these older cases and unidentified bodies will always be an incredible resource. I mean, there's so many. I mean, these people that used to assault and rape people before 1988, they didn't think anything about DNA. That wasn't even in their head, right? So they just would leave it on the scene. They didn't even care if their blood was there. They didn't care about anything except fingerprints. Things like that. So, I mean, those cases, I always love this part about this whole thing is all these criminals that have killed and raped and murdered people over all these years are all sitting around crapping their pants, waiting for the door to be knocked on and handcuffs put on them because people are coming to get them. That's the best part. So.
Well, let's hope. Let's hope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like that. They were once just so peaceful, and about not even until I'd say Golden State Killer, that situation when it became public. You were doing stuff before that, but that's when people in the public started going, "Oh my God, I wasn't careful back then." Before that, they didn't care still, So, all right, so you got it out. Your DNA was uploaded to GEDmatch. Then you get the match, and then what happens after that?
Well, I said, "Oh, isn't that interesting? Oh my God, it's her sister! Oh my God!" And it's 3:00 in the morning. I have nobody to call. Right? I'm not going anywhere. So then I Googled her name and email, and I said, "She's been on podcast about this." Well, I thought that's really interesting. How come it never kind of all fit together here? What's going on? So I emailed Linda and Misty, my two, my trusty people, and they had both kind of helped on the case. Linda was on the pipeline and genealogist, and I think Misty was the original contact, to get the proposal and all the paperwork done. So I'm going to sleep at 3:30. I'm tired. I just want people to leave me alone. Let me sleep. I'll mess with you in the morning. I don't care who you are. So of course, Linda being in, she gets my email. She's already up, because it's 6:30. She thinks I'm getting up. She doesn't know I'm going to bed. So she calls me. Thank you, Linda, for waiting just a few hours. She calls me. It's 6:30 by me. I've had 3 hours sleep. It's 9:30 by her. She thinks everything's fine. And I'm like, Linda, thank you for calling back. I'm exhausted. Please don't. Yes, I get it. And then, so, as things developed, I know, Joe, she called you, and she thought I was on a call, but I wasn't. I was hoping to talk to you too, but I'll talk to you later. And it was like, well, what do we do? I mean, Joe, you're going to call Marianne? What do we do? What, you just going to walk in her front door and say, guess what? We found your sister after 50 years. How do you handle that? I mean, this is going to be a nuclear bomb.
Yeah. So and getting the call from Linda was probably the, pinnacle moment of my career. And just to hear that there had been so much searching and talking about Patricia, and I think it blew my mind initially that our paths haven't crossed or hadn't crossed earlier than they did, because I know you were looking at all of the Jane Doe cases up the East Coast, and ours was pretty widely covered, especially, unfortunately, and it is what it is, but when we exhumed the wrong body, that went national, and because media loves sad stories, or so that went national. And I'm just surprised that we hadn't crossed past once that happened. But yeah, you're right. What do we do now? We have this information and we want to reach out to Marianne as soon as possible. But that took some coordination too, because we didn't know what the appropriate method was, right? This type of information should be delivered in person, and logistically, we knew she was in Tennessee and we're in Connecticut, and that's a 2-hour flight. So we tossed back and forth whether or not we wanted to knock on her door in person. But I think what was more important to us was not to even waste 24 hours, right? We didn't want to waste the time it would take to figure out travel arrangements and come down. And although it would have been more personable to knock on your door and give you a hug in person, it was more important for us to get the information that you were looking for delivered to you as soon as possible. So what we decided to do was to reach out to the Sullivan County Sheriff's Department, and as you can imagine, trying to get a human being on the line at a police department, and I'm sure at somewhere the size of Sullivan County, I really don't know how big it is, but it's tough, especially to get a detective on the phone right away. It's tough. So at first we called and we got a voicemail. I said, I'm not stopping here. So I called back again, got another voicemail, called back a third time to the dispatch line, and I knew that dispatch, you're going to reach a person. And a dispatcher picked up, and I introduced myself, and I basically said, I just solved a cold case. I need you to put me on the phone with an investigator immediately. And the dispatcher didn't know really what to do, but she put me on hold, and she got a detective on the line. And sure enough, it was a detective that Marianne had worked with, believe it or not, on her sister's case. And Marianne, who exactly was that?
Detective Peters of the Sullivan County Sheriff's Department over here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we get Detective Peters on the phone, and I explained to him again who I am, from a little town in Connecticut. We have a 48-year-old cold case that we're investigating, and we just found out that the identity of our victim, her sister, lives in your community. And sure enough, he was well aware of the case because he had worked with Marianne on this case. He took my number and he said, I'm going to shoot over to her house immediately, which is what he did. He said, I'll give you a phone call in about 15 minutes. And my phone rang in 15 minutes, and Marianne, you could take it from there.
Yeah. I wasn't really expecting that. I thought, well, okay, he's going to take my DNA, because he had taken my DNA for comparison to another cold case about a year or two ago. And so I just thought, oh, it's Detective Peters. And he told me he had somebody that wanted to talk to me, and I was a little confused because, it's confusing. The next thing I know, you're on the phone telling me, and poor Detective Peters. I kind of lost it. I definitely lost it. It's still so much. The chances just so tiny. Nobody reported her missing. For the longest time, it was just me just yelling, and then it was me and my cousin just kind of screaming out into the void. And then there's Facebook because I have, a conversation with my family. And okay, let's go head out of our comfort zone and go to social media. I still can't believe it. Just to know, because when you're watching shows like this, or when anything, true crime related, which I do, you always hope. They talk about the cold case detectives, right? And they talk about, police officers. You always see the police officers that are committed and everything. And you always kind of hope and pray that you have somebody like that on the other end. You always hope and pray, but you don't really think necessarily that there's going to be that at the end. You just kind of have to have faith and just kind of keep going. And just to know she was a person, because it gets to the point where it's almost like they didn't exist. I mean, I'm sure that they're going through that in New Haven. I mean, a police department is having trouble finding out what school she went to. I don't feel so bad now. Every time I make a call here lately, I found out New Haven's been there first. East Haven. I keep saying New Haven. I'm sorry. East Haven.
That's the one that pops into most people's mind first. I mean, it's sort of the more,
No. Sorry. East Haven. They're the best. Sorry, New Haven, but is what
they're East Haven. Look at he's being politically correct now.
Yeah. Yes. Often imitated and never duplicated. But you just, like I said, hope that those are the people that are looking, and that, you find out that it's not just a police department. It's Identifinders out there. You've got Colleen, you've got Linda Doyle, you've got all kinds of people. It's just amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. I'm very, very grateful, truly. And I hope that everybody that can hear me, GED match. It's very easy to do. If you've got a problem, ask me. I'll tell you. Ask anybody. They'll tell you. Find out. Just do it.
Yeah, so what's really amazing about this one is that, I guess the thing is, you would have found out regardless, but you putting it in there made it, on the Jed match, made it really fast. I mean, if you weren't in Jed match, I don't know what the next match was. Do you remember what that was?
No, it was pretty low, though. It wasn't that high. I mean, I can check, but it was second cousin, maybe third cousin. I don't remember because, listen, I wasn't paying attention to the next match. I had no interest in the second match after about 30 seconds.
You probably didn't even think it was real, because that's almost ludicrous to have that,
Yeah, it was kind of like a Twilight Zone experience for somebody that does this every day. We have cases that go on 4 and 5 years now because, they just do. I mean, the contents of the database, and this one was like, you really can't believe what you're looking at for a few minutes. It's like,
no, like maybe an error.
I did all this.
Yeah, and that's crazy. So, I mean, you got the answer. It must be a cool feeling for you, Marianne, that, Joe, Captain Joe, what do you want to be called? Joseph?
Joe.
Please,
Joe.
There's a guy like him that was out there still looking to identify an unknown person and really trying hard, not just, hell, we didn't find it that first time, forget it. Like really working hard, and eventually identifies this person, then it leads back to answering your lifelong question.
Yeah.
Yep. 2 lifelong questions, right there. I just wonder what the plans are. Joe, are you still investigating, right, to the backstory here? And that's very important. I mean, I'd like to just make one comment that genealogy's out there. Everybody's so excited about it, but keep in mind there's two parts. There's the DNA and there's the genealogy. Sometimes DNA's easy, genealogy's hard. Sometimes the DNA's hard, genealogy's easy, and vice versa, both easy, both hard. So don't forget DNA part, because in this case, that was the uphill battle. That was the hard part.
Well, imagine if you'd got what was it, the tooth? Is that what you ended up getting? What if you got that first? This would have been the most ludicrously easy case that you've ever solved. You would have got 33, whatever you call it, of, what is it, not nanogram? Yeah, nanograms, right?
Yeah, nanograms. But, technology develops, and we jump on, who knows? Maybe it would. I think it would have worked. I think it was such a good sample. It was the femur. I think it would have worked, but that's not what happened. And you do the best you can for what you have in front of you. Mm-hmm. And, East Haven and Joe did what they could for what they had in front of them. Who knows why the pubic bone of all bones in the whole world, why did they keep the pubic bone? That's not my bone of choice.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I've never heard you mention that one as a DNA source.
No, we never used it before.
Yeah. So what's going on the investigative? Like, do you know any of the backstory of, how she left this? What was it called again? A home that she. Yeah, go ahead.
Boarding school.
Yeah, boarding school.
So what and again, once we identified Patricia, the first thing I did was go to the podcast, go to the Facebook page. I made sure not to like it initially, because I didn't want to tip my hand that we had possibly identified her. And, we wanted to, reach out to Marianne and have her be the first person to know. So we were sure to kind of look at all of these things anonymously in the background. But we learned a lot of information that we didn't originally know, obviously. And, it turns out that Patricia was born in Idaho Falls, Idaho in 1957 and relocated to the East Coast. She was born into a military family. And when they came to the East Coast, they ended up in Philadelphia first and ended up in New Jersey sometime after that. Marianne, Patricia's mom, died in 1968. So she died, before Patricia even went missing, and dad remarried. And it was at some time after that, in the early 1970s, that Patricia was allegedly sent to a boarding school. And it was a boarding school in the Monticello, New York area, Sullivan County, New York. And at some point at this boarding school, met a friend. And at some point after that, her and the friend possibly fled the school, ran away from the school en route to Maine, where her friend's family lived. And as you can imagine, back then, the common method of travel was to hitchhike, right? Was to try to get from point A to point B as cheap as possible. And sometimes that required you to hitchhike. And hitchhiking was very dangerous. So yeah. we believe that it was at some point, her hitchhiking possibly, she met the person who would ultimately kill her. But we have a lot of questions. One of the questions is, what boarding school did she go to? Again, we know it's in the Monticello, New York area, in Sullivan County, but we don't know exactly which one she went to. As you can imagine, there were more boarding schools back then than there are now. So the boarding school she went to possibly isn't in operation anymore. But there are, I'm sure, records that still exist. And hopefully we will obtain those. We've gotten, since this story has gone up the East Coast, we have gotten people that reached out with a ton of information regarding boarding schools, some that are still in operation, some that operated under a different name back then and have a different name now, and some that are just not in operation anymore. So our investigators are looking into all of that.
How do you know that she went to a boarding school factually?
So we don't, right? And I think that is an extremely important, and that's why I said before, allegedly, only because the information, and Marianne, you could probably talk on this a lot better than I can, but a lot of the information that the family has gotten was from a stepmother who, over the years, her credibility has come into question. I'll say that. Marianne, you could probably touch on that a little bit now.
Yeah, I reached out to her a couple of years ago. I hadn't seen her for a very long time. It wasn't the greatest household to grow up in. It was challenging. I texted her. I asked her some questions about it. That's where Monticello came up, was in those text messages. She said she would answer anything for me, but then very shortly thereafter, when I explained to her that really all I wanted to know was information in regards to my sister and what school she went to, she said she couldn't remember. But yet, 2 minutes later in the conversation, she asked me if my favorite number was still 22, which, yeah, it is. So, to me, that came off as a mixed signal. My oldest brother, I think, said that he thought he had sent my sister a letter, but the letter came back. And he said he thinks that may have been Vermont. So she says New York. We lived in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. She's found in Connecticut. Maine is involved. Vermont is involved. Everybody, please dust off if your grandma has a yearbook, okay? Your auntie has a yearbook. They went anywhere to school up in the Northeast, anywhere up in the Northeast. Have them dusted off.
Well, it's weird. If they were hitchhiking is what I always say. It used to be the serial killer. That's just, you got a person willing to get into your car. They drive around, pick you up, and you're just at their mercy. And now it's sex workers because they're the only people really that'll still just get into your car. But is it is it possible that, everything's possible. But maybe the friend that she was walking with, maybe they both were kidnapped at the same time. And maybe that person's another person somewhere. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was definitely one of our concerns. So we don't know if Patricia ever made it to Maine. If she did, she probably spent a year or two in Maine, because I think the timeline is 1973-ish. She had never been heard from or seen again. So if she was found in 1975, that is a good 2 years or a year and a half or so that she was out doing whatever. Mm-hmm. So possibly if she was en route to Maine, maybe she made it to Maine and then tried to get back, right? Tried to hitchhike from Maine back. I think what's interesting about the case is that one of the main suspects, M-A-I-N, main suspects, was his name was Glenn Askborn, and his name has been spoken of widely regarding this case. But he has a Maine connection, the state of Maine connection, which we knew for years that the main suspect was a guy who had been arrested and convicted of another homicide in Maine. And learning the information that we learned about Patricia was that she possibly tried to get to Maine or made it to Maine and tried to get back. So the suspect, who was a suspect back then, had the same sort of from Maine down the 91 or 95 corridor, which is the same path that Patricia possibly traveled to get from where she was going to Maine or back. So again, we didn't realize that until we identified Patricia, but the person they were looking at back then in the 70s, 80s, and 90s was, geographically in the same area that Patricia probably was in at the same time. So very interesting.
Is he a serial killer, that guy?
So he wasn't a serial killer that I know. I know he was convicted of a homicide in Hancock, Maine. They wrote a book on it, and he murdered a woman named Amelia Cave, and I think the story was he befriended her and stole money from her. At some point, she caught him. He killed her, and he discarded her body inside of a rock wall that he constructed. And they found her body when they deconstructed the rock wall that he had just built. He bound and gagged her and tied her up the same exact way that Patricia was found bound and gagged. And it was pretty extensive. And for those two cases to be so similar in the way they were bound and gagged, I mean, it's striking how close.
Is that something you can? I mean, if people on my channel, if you can't tell us how that was, or you don't want to listen to it or whatever, you don't have to say, but it'd be interesting to hear specific.
Okay.
Is that okay, or?
I'm okay.
Are you okay? Can you tell us that, or, Joe?
Yeah. So, yep, she was bound with some kind of electrical wire. The knots, I could look it up exactly the type of knot, but it's a certain type of hitch knot that her wrists and legs were bound in. And again, you would have to have some knowledge of knots to be able to bind her the way she was. She was wrapped in a tarp, but her head was covered in a plastic bag as well. So you had her head covered in a plastic bag, but also wrapped up in a tarp at the same time.
Is that how they determine? I think it said asphyxiation. Is that how she died, from the bag?
So the medical examiner's cause of death was asphyxiation by smothering. So I'm not sure if they would determine that by asphyxiation from a bag over the head.
What's the difference between a bag over the head that's sealed and you asphyxiate compared to a smothering? Like, what would be a physical difference? I mean, maybe there's bruising if you're pushing down, but let's say there isn't. How would you know the difference?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess that's probably a better question that the medical examiner can answer. I could only imagine that it's the pressure that's being used. When you're smothering somebody, there's a certain level of pressure that you use to achieve that, as opposed to just asphyxiation from the bag that's placed over your head and the lack of oxygen that results as a result of it. So
right. So what were the similarities between that? Were the knots and everything exactly the same as that other individual that you were talking about?
Exactly. Yep. So the knots were similar, and the double bagging, the bag over the head, and the wrapping, that was also similar.
Oh, that's interesting. So that was a case way back then. They just happened to get the information on that. Look how similar this is, and that he was a suspect. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
I ask you a question.
Wow.
Do you still have the knot? You might be able to get DNA from the knot if you still have it.
So I guess the embarrassing part about the whole case is that sometime in the 1990s.
Don't tell me a flood. Don't tell me a flood.
Sometime in the 1990s, there was a flood.
Ah, God! Every time, man. How many cases have had the flood? It's crazy.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah, I didn't even. Yeah, there's been like, I can't tell you how many cases that I've called the detectives and they go, well, unfortunately, there was a big flood in the basement and it destroyed all the. It's just like,
that's
wow.
incredible.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. And again, I mean, I can't speak to the investigators in the 90s. I was in middle school at the time, but they threw away all of the physical evidence. None of it is available. It's been widely reported on that there's just no physical evidence that still exists related to this case. And that was just another challenge that was in our in our way. We were lucky that the pubic bone had been left up at the medical examiner's office during this whole time, or else we wouldn't have even have had that.
So when they do that, when a flood happens like that, they just kind of just chuck everything, or what? I mean,
I could tell you that police procedure nowadays and the way we do things in 2023 is definitely different than how they did things in the past. I can't speak to sort of how or why they did things, but they got rid of everything that existed from it.
How about on her physically? I mean, is that something? This sounds, but you can sometimes extract DNA. Let's say she was assaulted, sexually assaulted. There could still be DNA inside that you can extract. I don't know if that's something you might think of if you think that she was assaulted.
So she wasn't sexually assaulted as far as their determination when she was found. And that's, there was no signs of her being sexually assaulted. They did conduct a rape kit on her posthumously, and they did not find any pubic hair or any foreign substances that they would have taken it to the next level. So they did do their due diligence, and they did perform a rape kit on her and everything else, but they determined that she wasn't sexually assaulted.
You know, what's interesting is oftentimes when you have two people abducted, one of them is the target and the other one just gets killed out of necessity to get away with the crime. So if she was with a friend, it'd be interesting at some point to know if the friend was the target and is put somewhere else, because you're saying that she was just put on the side of the road or put there. Maybe the friend that she went with was the victim and taken somewhere else. I mean, it's just a total speculation, but it's kind of it's odd to have a murder like that with not a sexual assault, I would think. Like, what would be the point, unless there was some other, I don't know. It's hard to picture something like that. Like, what would be another reason to smother and strangle somebody and dump their body somewhere? It's just
so
crazy.
We're doing our due diligence, reaching out to every single person that had any relevant information or possible relevant information regarding the case at the time. I think it's important to note that the original or the initial suspect that they were looking at, he had a connection to East Haven, Connecticut as well. So he lived in East Haven at the time of the homicide. So he had the main connection in the East Haven connection, which could geographically put him in the area at the right time. But the other thing we're doing is we're going through every bit of initial information that was obtained at the time. And without talking too much about it, because it is still an open homicide investigation, we're starting to see that a lot of the information that investigators received at the time when the case was hot, like 1975-ish, 1976, was relevant to Patricia's case. And there was some pretty accurate information that investigators got at the time, but it was hard for them to really follow up with it because they didn't know exactly who she was. So it's one of those cases where you can get all of this information coming in, but unless you know who Patricia was, where she came from, what she might have been involved in, then what do you do with this information? So they had nothing really. They had nothing really to go off of because her identity remained a mystery for so long.
I mean, are those some of the things you can't talk about? Some of those probably can't.
There's a couple of bits of information that I'm not going to speak on at the moment, just because it's some pretty good information that we're going to take a little bit further. But again, I guess it's important to note that 48 years is a long time, and everybody, and I'm talking a good 85-90% of the people who reached out at first, who had possible relevant information, who may have been a suspect, they're all deceased now. You know, the suspect that I'm talking about with the main East Haven connection, Glenn Askborn, he passed away in October of 2022.
What's his last name? Can you spell that, the last name for that guy?
Askborn, Askeborn,
Okay.
or it may be Askborne. I'm not sure what it
Also,
Okay.
by Samantha.
What's that?
A lot of articles are also under Samantha Glenner.
Okay. I was just going to see if I could find him on. Was he a sexual killer when he killed the one person, or was it just sort of? I mean, the one victim that he does have. What was the reasoning behind that?
It was a friend who lived in Hancock, Maine. I believe she lived alone, and he befriended her. She trusted him, and he stole money from her at some point, and she caught him. And I'm not sure if she approached him on it or confronted him, but at some point after it was discovered that he had stole money from her, he killed her and then discarded her body. Hancock, Maine, it's wide open, it's very quiet, you know, and he built a rock wall, discarded her body somewhere in the foundation of the rock wall, and then built the rock wall on top of her. And that's where they found her. I think the only thing that really got him caught was once the scope started to, you know, look at him, there was witnesses that said, that's strange. Yeah. He built a rock wall recently.
Yeah. It's like he poured a cement driveway right after she disappeared. Boy, that's not suspicious. Yeah.
Exactly. The book is interesting. The Pat Flagg, she's a journalist. She's passed away now, but she was a journalist in the local newspaper at the time, and she happened to be the victim's one of her neighbors as well. So she took a passion for the case. She reported on it in her newspaper at the time, and then wrote a book afterwards too.
Now the other, I mean, there's people that speculate on this serial killer. I think it was Cottingham or something like that. Was he? I don't know if that's his name. Kind of not remembering. Is that correct? There's a guy.
I'm not sure that name. We never looked at a Cottingham.
Maybe that's not what. Maybe let me look. I did have a link here that went right to it.
I know that there was a few different names that came in over the years, but we're pretty confident that we're in at least the general ballpark of people that we're looking at.
Yeah, it said something like it said this thing that somebody sent me. It's a Facebook. It said serial killer Richard Begenwald entered the same area that Richard Cottingham had actively trolled until his May 22nd, 1980 arrest. But he was in that general area, I guess. But I don't know if he was picked up hitchhikers or not. But you probably sounds like you got some good leads on the right track there. Especially if that knots or that one individual with the same knots and that sounds really intriguing there for you guys.
Yeah, I have a question for Joe though. You have these suspects, you have some stuff you're working on that, you've told us, you've not told us, you have a whole bunch of information you're working on. How do you think if you do solve the case, what would solve it if there was a flood, the evidence is gone, that kind of thing? Would you depend on a confession, or how would that work without DNA?
Yeah. So looking at it from my own personal perspective, somebody that comes with values and a certain level of faith, 48 years is a long time. And, if you did it and, you want to get it off your chest, well, your mortality is knocking at your door, right? And at some point, I know that if I had been involved in something like this, I would have wanted to get right with God, and I, again, looking at it from my own true values, not the values of somebody that could take a life, but you would hope that, 48 years later, if you wanted to get it off your chest, we are able and willing to listen to you and to talk about how things got out of hand, in August of 1975. So that's one way for sure. The second way is when people do these types of crimes and are involved in this type of behavior, sometimes they keep mementos, and we know that Patricia was one to always wear a class ring. And again, would have been a shot in the dark, and I'm sure the probability would have been way off, but I mean, what would the probability of us even being right here, right now, talking about this case in the first place? So maybe if we got lucky, we would find that class ring that Marianne talks about extensively in her coverage of Patricia. So, I think what's most important to note, though, is that while a arrest and a conviction would be, paramount into what we're trying to do here, I think what's even more important is to be able to deliver the likely events that led to Patricia's death to the people that cared about her and the people that loved her and the people that I'm sure were wondering, what happened to her over the last 47, 48 years. So it's like, we're not going to stop until we have nowhere else to go. And an arrest and a conviction would be great. We're realistic in the sense that may not be in the cards. We've gotten this far. Identifying her was one of the most important things we could have done. But, I'm sure it's unlikely to be able to get a conviction out of this, but it's not unlikely to be able to deliver the events that likely led up to Patricia's death. And that to us is the most important.
Yeah, almost like a coroner's inquest where this is what we think happened, but there isn't going to be an arrest made. The person died, in 1986,
There's one other way. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Like I said, that person's going to either meet y'all or he's going to meet his maker, going to meet my parents on the other side, one way or the other. But people talk about what they do. Possibly this person threatened another young lady and said, I've done it before. I'll do it to you. Mention my sister's name. That ring that I always mention is a Sicilian Academy class ring from the 50s. It belonged to my aunt. It was a gift. It was given to her. Maybe she gave it to a friend as a parting gift. You could probably tell from the picture she got like a slate cleft chin too. That's a pretty distinctive feature. But possibly somebody knows somebody, talks to somebody. If they've already passed away, what do you have to lose? Just anonymously write, hey, this guy I used to know, we were hanging out one day and he was like, yeah, that came on and I did that. And I didn't believe him at the time, but, maybe he did. Anything like that. This thing has been such a series of little random miracles.
Why not one more, right?
Why not one more? I'm going for broke. I had faith that this would happen and happen, regardless of what anybody else said. And that's another thing that people need to know. Just keep going.
Do you have a picture of the ring somewhere?
I don't.
Is there a way to I don't know. There's got to be another version of it if other people have it. Right?
My cousin.
There's a picture going around. There's a picture, Marianne, of your sister possibly with
the plaid jacket.
I think so.
You can barely see the ring on it.
You can barely see it. Yes, that's the one.
Oh, really? I haven't seen that picture. Is there a different one than this one? That's the only one I've seen.
Yeah.
I could email it to you quick.
Oh, you could? Okay. Yeah, cool.
There could be other people that went to that school, though, or had that ring, that...
Well, that's my aunt's ring.
Oh, it's not a class ring.
It was a gift to Patricia.
Okay.
So Trish would not have wanted to take that off because that was like a tie to my mom's family. Mm-hmm. My mom's family, Clinton clan, they were all close. They were very close. As a matter of fact, my uncle is a retired detective, Bill Clinton.
Cool.
So he was looking...
Not the Bill Clinton, right?
No.
Are you saying Bill Clinton?
Yeah, that's what I said. That's his name.
Okay.
But no, not.
Okay, I'm just kidding. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Tricia had apparently just got a message from my cousin. She must be listening. Hi, Fran. That Tricia had admired the ring. And so Aunt Aggie, who's our Aunt Agnes Clinton, gave it to her. But were you able to send that over?
Yeah, I got it. I'm just putting it in the right folder so I don't just randomly put it somewhere.
And the Sicilian Academy is closed. It's no longer operational. But I think Fran was looking into Jostens to see if they could historically look.
Well, there should be yearbooks, shouldn't there? That you can look in for, go to the, I was talking to Joe about that at the press conference. All the schools have yearbooks, and a lot of times those wind up in the local library or in the local historical archives. And they have classmates.com online that has yearbooks. So you could potentially even search for her name and come up with a...
Oh, you come up with me if you do that.
Okay.
So
All right.
right here. This
Just
one?
so y'all know out there that I started a Classmates account, her name, to look for her at one point.
Okay, got it. I thought you probably had, but I thought I might as well say something.
Yeah, I don't know if you would have the ring shown or not.
But not online. I'm saying that at the local libraries,
Oh,
in the town, was it Monticello, New York? I mean, what like that. Sometimes, or you can actually, put a call out, to graduates in the newspaper, local newspaper, graduates of this. Do you have your yearbook? Can you check to see if Patricia was in your class or in the school? You can do that.
Been working on it.
Okay, good job.
Yeah,
That's your
whole army working
I
on
got
it.
you. I'm on it. I'm on it all the time.
That's the mission. And it's just, it amazes me. Here I'm in California. Linda's in New York. Joe, you're in Connecticut. Marianne's in Tennessee. Connection to Maine, maybe a school in New York, born in Idaho Falls. You look at all of that. We live in kind of an amazing world.
I know. It's incredible.
Hey, let me ask you something, Joe. Isn't it like, you got to admit, like, it's one of the greatest feelings ever, right? What you just did. Because you gave a name back to something that was almost completely hopeless. And you give a name back. I mean, I've been on the financial end of it, but I've never part of the actually out there in the field doing something about it like you. Mm. And Colleen does the DNA end. I mean, what does it feel like to you?
Yeah, no, it's overwhelming. I mean, you become a police officer at 21, 22, and you think you want to, chase bad guys and, do that whole thing. And while there was, plenty of that, the most rewarding feeling is to be able to deliver this type of news to Marianne, who just wondered, for all of these years, what happened to her, and although it was bad news, I mean, I know, Marianne, you talk about how you knew she had died in your heart of hearts, but to be able, to deliver that bad news was, I mean, it took a lot out of us, because I'm sure there was some hope that maybe she would show up one day, years later, and, but to be able to give her, her name back, and it was a case, again, that so many detectives worked so hard on, and they weren't able to get to where they wanted to be able to do that. And your courage, because we could have worked as hard as we worked, but it would have went nowhere if you didn't upload your DNA to GEDmatch. So again, I mean, it just all came together, and Identifinders from the cold case meeting. I mean, it just all worked out perfectly. So I'm so thankful, and again, blown away to be able to deliver this to you. So,
I have a question or an observation. On the occasion, either whether it was an adoption search or an identification we made, like getting ready to pick up the phone, I'm thinking of an adoption search I did, years ago. The man was 78 years old. He had looked for his family for 56 years. Long story, really interesting story. Found his father. And I picked up the phone knowing I'm going to tell, it's like a torpedo getting ready to hit the battleship. I know that within the next 30 seconds, somebody's life is going to be changed. And I can't grasp that moment. I can't, it's just because on one side you understand, on the other side you understand, but that moment, it's just, you can't get your head, you just can't absorb it.
Yeah, I just really quick, once I got the phone call from Linda, I had the whole rest of the night and then into the next day, and that's when we called Marianne. But you can imagine listening to the podcasts of Marianne talk about Patricia, and I know that Marianne, you were focused on the Lady of the Dunes, unidentified female for a while, and just to hear all the effort that went into the possibility that she was the Lady of the Dunes, Jane Doe, and then finding her Facebook page and then looking at every single one of the comments where I think Lady of the Dunes was identified, and you said, well, very happy for her family, but we still need to solve ours. And just having that information, for a good 12 hours or 16 hours, man, it was, it was a feeling that's hard to describe.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like the people that receive the information, it's just must be overwhelming. Even though you guys are the ones that make it happen, it feels great. What does it feel like to Marianne and Daniel Armentrout's brother and all of them? It's just crazy. I mean, I know for the freaks, we call ourselves the freaks on my channel, by the way, but we all, that was like the greatest feeling ever, having the Daniel Armentrout one, because we followed that along for like a year and a half through all the different steps and redoing DNA and stuff like that. And it was so amazing, just this feeling like, wow, we were part of something so incredible, to give somebody's name back. And in this case, Tricia got her name back, Marianne got answers, and it really just came down to, because the odds of it being solved if there wasn't a Joseph Murgo here and other people that say, hey, let's go ahead and keep looking at this body that was in this cemetery, it was like zero. I mean, if you didn't have somebody, I mean, it's an absolute miracle this case is solved in a way, except, I mean, what do you think? I mean, doesn't it feel that way? Because why were you the one that just kept looking to see if you could identify that person after all those years? Like, what made you do that one day?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to take credit for it, because I know that that number one, the true hero here is Marianne, who uploaded her DNA. But even on the investigative side, this case was a prime example of waiting for technology to catch up, and it caught up when myself and Captain Emmerman and all of the investigators that worked on this case to exhumer, it caught up when we were the ones who occupied that space at the time. And yes, there's something to be said for, everybody that came to the table and didn't give up. Marianne for 47 years, us for 48 years, or Colleen for sticking up, hanging out with us
for 30 seconds. Yeah, Colleen for 30 seconds.
You were there for 2 years, and you wouldn't hear from me, and then it'd be like, hey, it's me again,
Hi, Joe. How are you? Yeah, I haven't heard from you.
Yeah.
It probably would have been cooler if she had to spend a month working through a big tree to find it. Instead, it was just, what?
I think it's awesome, because that's the first I'm hearing about her part of that experience. I mean, I knew about her involvement because I met her before the press conference and everything, but to hear that's really cool too.
Well, yeah, I want to say I learned a lot too. Every case. We have just gone through, the uphill battle to get the right bone, the right DNA. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot. I learned every case is like another child. And you learn from it, especially these kind of cases, because I learned about, in the second exhumation, the kind of remains were available. We had to talk about to the lab, what's the best. She was frozen. There's some tissue left. Should we use that? Should we use a bone? Discussing and, learning about, exhumations, learning about, the pubic bone didn't work. Okay, we learned that. It was a learning experience. And I want to say in my experience, and Joe, you can say this too, but I'm working on a case like a kind of a long-term case, and it doesn't have to be this kind. It could be an adoption case, a Holocaust case. I do a lot of Holocaust work. I'm not done yet. I have an instinct that I'm not done yet. Like I sort of, I'm going to switch with Joe for a minute, and I'm thinking that I'm not done yet. Now, wait a minute. I could call the sexton of the cemetery. I could do that. Oh, okay. He's coming, and you get the wrong one, and you still say, wait a minute, I'm not done yet. Wait, there's something, and you have a feeling first you didn't get the answer, but wait a minute, there's something else that you can do. And then you try that, and then, well, okay, or now what? Now, and a lot of cases that maybe are solved or not solved that are longer term, there's always a feeling to me, there's something I haven't done. There's something I haven't tried. There's like a keyhole I can try and squeeze through to get to the other side. And my best time for figuring that out was right before I fall asleep. Between being really awake and really asleep, there's this twilight zone where I'm sort of thinking in the background, and maybe the TV's running, maybe I'm just ready to go to sleep. And right before I go to sleep, I go, wait a minute, I didn't try XYZ. Wait a minute.
Do you get up out of bed and write it down? Do you get up?
Yeah, how about if?
Do you get up out of bed and write it down at that point?
No.
You don't want to forget in the morning, man. It was okay. Wait a minute,
I solved it. Wait. Oh, and I wake up the next morning, I say, what was I thinking again? Yeah. No, I don't write it down. I remember it, or it comes back, the intuition. I don't have to write the intuition down. That comes with me through the night and into the next morning. And I may have to kind of think a little bit, but it will come back to the end on the ride with that. And I just want to say, I don't know if you have the same experience, Joe, but that's how I read what you just said. That, wait a minute, that's not the answer. Something else. And that something else, a lot of times for me, is a new technology, maybe. I read something about that. Wait a minute, let me check that out. Something like that. You pick up kind of ideas, and when that idea doesn't work, wait a minute, you just read about a new idea, or somebody else came, and you get to the point is, I haven't tried everything yet. That's my point of view. I haven't tried everything yet.
Yeah.
Got to try this, XYZ.
When somebody called you, Joseph, to mention Identifinders and Dr. Colleen, what did they say to you?
So they had a...
No, I want to know. I do it.
No, you don't have to.
Well, before you get to that, my perception, and I know this, is that Dr. Fitzpatrick and Identifinders are way more creative and think outside the box on how to solve DNA projects than anybody else. They ain't even close, They just.
Thank you. You've had some doozies.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's what you heard, but go ahead. What did you hear when they?
Yeah, no, I mean, Colleen, you must have had a case with the Marianne, Connecticut Police Department, or
that was
somewhere.
David Paul. It was a little boy that was found frozen to death. He was a newborn infant on New Year's Day, 1988.
Oh wow! So it was that case that they recommended you, and I knew that we wanted to work with, a genealogy company, but we didn't know where to start, or even if that existed outside of our state labs, which I knew were inundated with cases. But he swore by you, and I mean, he looked at me in the eyes and said, "No, seriously, you need to call Dr. Fitzpatrick."
Thank you.
And,
Who was the
Yeah.
detective? I know those guys up in Meriden. You know, that was Chief Cassat, retired.
yes,
And then Bernstein, Steve Bernstein was the detective we wound up solving it with. That was great.
yeah, yeah, no. So I didn't think twice about it. And again, I reached out to you, but initially it was just that, that forum on your website, and I tried to pack in as much detail as I could, but you called me right away. So and I think that's important to note too, is that you're extremely accessible. I mean, I even called you on
awesome.
the day of the exhumation while we had at the cemetery. I reached out to you with Michelle Clark from the medical examiner's office in the hole, and I said, "What do you need?" And you told me. You directed me to the femur.
Oh, wow. You were actually in the grave doing that. Oh, my God.
Yes,
A
in
good
real
thing I
time,
answered the phone that day.
Wow.
So you've answered the phone for me every other time I've called too. So
Right.
I guess that's the point, is that it was
really good
great
at
working with you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Well, pass the word. We love my favorite thing on what I do is talking to detectives, and figuring out what's going on and kind of, telling them how to do genealogy. And I find that, when you're in school, if you have a bad math teacher, you get math anxiety, and oh no, it's going to be terrible. I got to take a math class. Oh my God. Same with genealogy. If you just sit and explain to somebody, no problem, they'll get it. But if you kind of swamp them with the wrong kind of information, it's, you don't know, can't get your head around it.
Yeah.
So I love talking to detectives, telling them kind of how it works, what they can do. And I hope I can stay, accessible. I try and be as open as I can, take as many calls as I can, or call back if I need to. I really love that part of my work. And so, out there in Grant Hughes land, if you're a detective and you're listening, give me a call. I'll tell you how to do it.
Well, it sounds like there's a whole bunch of work to be done in that same cemetery. I mean, who do you contact about some of those? I mean, that's crazy. Yeah,
we don't know the circumstances behind any other grave in there, but we do know that there's a large amount of caskets that are in unmarked areas. So not something that we're gonna look into at the moment. I do have resources in hand in Connecticut that I will definitely run it by, and they were actually on scene during those exhumations, just as support. But
I mean, if they have a couple that they might be interested in, maybe we could do some of those at some point. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, Marianne, what do you want people to be doing here? Give your Jed match pitch. Come on, you got to do it.
Everybody, if you're on any kind of Ancestry.com or 23andMe, any sort of genealogy site, upload your data to GED Match. It's very, very easy to do.
Tell them how to do it. How does it work? See if you can do it in the 2-second.
You just click.
Yeah, it's just pretty much
download.
Click.
You download the raw file, right? And then you upload it to GEDmatch, right? Isn't that how it works? Or is it easier now? That's when I did it.
No, you go into settings
to do. I don't even remember. I'm not even kidding.
No, you go into settings. In whatever company you work with, there's going to be something in there that says settings, right? It's somewhere, or your account, and you click. And if you don't even know where to find it, you can Google it. It's somewhere. So you click, and it says download raw data, and there it goes. It's on your hard drive.
Then you go to GEDmatch and you upload it.
Right. You walk over.
Right. Yeah.
See, like you walk over.
Yeah, just like that. That looks like pretty stiff legs there. I don't know if that would really.
Yeah, you walk over electronically. You click on set up free account, and you go click, and you answer a few questions that you don't really have to answer most of them, but the important thing is opt in to law enforcement. Right. And now if you're a John or Jane Doe case, you're automatically opted in because it's humanitarian effort. But if you're trying to solve a violent crime, you have to opt in if you want law enforcement to see your data. Now, in doing that, how do you feel, Marianne, about privacy problems? Do you think there's, like, if you say you were not solving, it wasn't Patricia really, it was you have a decision whether to reveal your matches to law enforcement. Say it's a violent crime. How do you feel about opting in a violent crime, identifying a violent offender, not a Jane Doe like your sister? I'm saying because there's
spoken to somebody about that very recently.
Yeah.
I think that's also very, very important because, in that case, doing something like what we're doing right now, any kind of podcasts or anything, that's something that I'm doing voluntarily. That's not something that you're going to do if, say, your third cousin has committed a murder in some other state, and then you're helping. You could be helping. Number one, there could be another Jane Doe out there right now. You could be helping with that. You could be helping somebody keeping from offending again. You could be saving from people ending up at 18 years old in a ditch. There's so much, and if you're not a criminal, why are you worried about it? Is my thing. I
ask that because there are privacy considerations. Some people are a little bit nervous and concerned. Personally, I'm not. Personally, if even my brother was a serial killer, hey, please. He's not. Neither brother is a serial killer. Let me say,
neither am I. Not sure now.
That I know of. Not that I know of, but it's good. I'd want him off the street. So, but the privacy thing, people I'd say are a little bit less concerned than they were.
I think
initially.
the same thing of like CCTV. I always think to myself, who cares? Nobody looks at it unless something happens. But people, I always think the people who care are the ones that are likely kind of committing some crimes that don't want to be seen on a camera. Because I really don't give a damn that there's a camera on a street, film me, drive by. If a criminal comes by there and they're trying to track it, that's over in Europe. They just only look at it when they're tracking back a crime. They go back to the origins of it or keep following somebody. Other than that, they don't look at it. So it's kind of strange. It's similar. DNA is a little bit more personal, obviously, than that. But
well, I don't want people knowing I go to Walmart to buy a lot of candy bars all the time. So
I did see the video. It's crazy. She comes out of their thing with she has like a knapsack over her shoulder filled with Snickers. It's incredible.
Yeah, you see now everybody's going to know.
It's unbelievable. Looked like Santa Claus, but it was Snickers. So
yeah,
all right.
Now everybody's going to know and want some of the Snickers bars. Stop.
So do you have any, do you have any cold cases, Joseph, that if you came on and talked about it, might get some exposure out there that you can talk about?
Not really. I mean, there's definitely some unsolved homicides that we're taking a look at a little more extensively now. But that's pretty much it. I mean, this was the probably the most important case to us in investigative services division. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple of other things that we're taking a look at as well, unsolved homicides or what.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever need to get the word out on something, you definitely, welcome to come back on here. I think, just looking at the comments, I can see the comments. Everybody thinks like, wow, this guy's good, So there you go.
Yeah. Great.
He is amazing.
Yeah, you know what? That usually before we start, you show me how to pop out the chat. There's like a chat, and I'm just wondering if the audience has any questions, about
Let's see. Any questions?
Yeah, there's like I don't have it, but you can go online. Grant Hughes Investigates YouTube. There's three little dots, and you click, and it pops out, and people are making comments. But we forgot that part, so I said, "Great. Are there any questions that the audience has for the panelists?" Like they used to say on I've got a secret.
Yeah. Let's see. Any questions? I just typed it in there. See what they say.
What I can tell you while we wait, if any questions
Yeah.
do come in, is that the last part of this, which I think is, probably one of the most important parts, is that we're going to be taking place in a third exhumation, and that is to reunite Patricia with Marianne. And I know, Marianne, you have some plans on what you want to do with her remains, but we do want to relocate Patricia and reunite her back with Marianne. So we're looking forward to that as well.
That's
Oh,
good.
definitely.
Oh, that's very
Definitely.
cool.
She's gonna come back here. She's gonna be cremated. She's gonna come back here with me so I can talk to her for a while. And I have a cousin who is a priest who is going to say the service. We're going to her with my mom in the family plot in Pennsylvania. And I've never been to my mom's grave that I can remember. I wasn't encouraged. So when I go back, I'm bringing her children with me.
Cool.
Yeah, it's going to be nice.
Yeah. It's gonna be cool. Somebody asked, it's kind of not, it says, Colleen, have you ever helped in identifying missing in action soldiers?
In fact, I have. Now, when they're missing in action, they're missing, right? You can't identify them. I often get asked, can you help me find my cousin who has been missing? And I say, no, because the DNA goes missing with your cousin. So, but I have been I worked for a while as a contractor for the U.S. Casualty and Mortuary Affairs Office in Fort Knox, Kentucky. And there was a program to get the family DNA references for soldiers in the Korean War that had been killed in action or missing in action in case their remains were found, or in case they needed that and they're pretty sure they knew who it was. And there is a repository in Washington, D.C. where they keep all of the blood cards and all of the DNA in case. And in a few years ago, North Korea was a little bit more open than it is now. So they were trying to capitalize on that. There were 7,000 something missing persons, and I think, or KIAs, MIAs, and I think we got, not us, but the whole program got almost all of them. Family references for almost all of them. And that's besides the Hand in the Snow in a while back. That was a serviceman, but that's another story.
Hey, Joe, let's see. The other victim of that killer that was buried under the rock wall, that was a female, right?
That was a female. Yep.
Okay.
Her name was Amelia Cave.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said. Okay, somebody asked that.
She was an older woman, wasn't she, in her 60s?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. And that was in, 1985, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, people are asking about if they can get a picture of the ring, but we already discussed that's the only picture, is that one little shot. But I'm sure there's replicas or some sort of, out there somebody has another version of the ring that looks just like it. I mean, obviously, right? It was a class ring, right? I mean, yeah. There's probably 50 or 100 of them, maybe. So, I don't know. I don't know how you get somebody. It seems like you might be able to do a Facebook post somewhere, maybe in a one of those sort of class reunion type places that you can go back far enough and say, hey, does anybody have a ring? I mean, you're looking, if it's a 1950 ring, you're looking at people born in 1932, making them 90 years old, right? Because you're like 18 when you get the class ring, maybe something, right?
Yeah, but it wasn't a class ring. It was a gift.
No, it was a class ring.
Oh, it was? Okay.
The blue stone, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was Aggie's class ring from the Sicilian Academy.
Okay.
So it was in the early 50s, Fran. I know you're listening, so what year was it? If you're can type it in somewhere.
She's in the chat.
Text coming up on my she'll text me and I'll see it come up on my iPad. But it was my Aunt Agnes's ring from the Sicilian Academy. And my sister loved the ring. She had admired the ring. So Aunt Agnes gave it to her in 1953.
Okay, 1953. So that gives people, and what was it? The school?
Academy.
Say it again one more time. I was interrupting.
Sicilian Academy.
Sicilian or just Cillian?
Like Cecilia.
Oh, yeah, Sicilian. Okay.
Yeah.
And where, what state?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, okay. Well, there you go, everybody. You sleuthers out there. Who knows? I mean, that's how stuff works, man. 1953, Sicilian Academy, Pennsylvania. Like what city? You got a city for that?
Fran, what city? I know you're watching. She'll text me and it'll come up.
Probably isn't more than one Sicilian Academy in Pennsylvania back then. But
Ilian, by the way.
Say it again.
Cecelian.
Okay, thank you.
And in Philly.
And that's a good homework assignment for the audience. Find a copy, a picture.
That'd be a nice piece for you to have, for sure. I mean,
School closed in 2000.
Oh, well.
Rats.
Well, if it's early 50s, though, like I said, I mean, people would be 88 years, 86 years old or whatever, 87. But there's a lot of people that age still walking around. So.
Yeah, they were.
They're trying to get those pictures.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Any last questions in there? I mean, I don't want to keep you on all night. I mean, do you guys have more you want to add to it? I mean, it's just such a crazy story, how it all came together like that.
I'm just amazed. That's all I have to add. It's every time I think about it with the flood, first start with the pubic bone and the flood, and then add, I didn't know I was talking to Joe. I don't remember I was talking to Joe while he was standing in Patricia's grave pulling up bones, but I guess I was. But that's kind of a nice thing to think about. All the way to the oh my God moment at 3:30 in the morning.
Somebody typed in, is DNA work being done on the CT River Valley killings? I'm not sure if that's Connecticut River Valley killings.
Must be Connecticut. Must be Connecticut.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I'm not sure. I think DNA should be, worked on every case, because that's just how you solve these things nowadays.
I totally agree. It's amazing. I mean, it's absolutely. You know what I was talking to Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick about a while back was, during the Idaho 4 case, it seems like if you had the right people in the right place, that you could rapidly do genetic genealogy. Like if you had a case and there's a blood sample just all by itself, not mixed with anything, you grabbed it. If you have the right people lined up and prioritize, you could get that DNA sample sequenced within 2 days or so, whatever, and then get it put into bioinformatics like within a 24-hour period. If there was just somebody only doing that, you upload it and bam, you're already got matches and you're working on it simultaneously with crimes. I think that's kind of where we're heading at some point. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
There's rapid DNA that does CODIS within a couple of hours. I'm sure Joe knows that. But that's CODIS, that's not genealogy, but I would imagine genealogy would be next.
I mean, most people aren't in CODIS databases. Criminals
most people
are, right? But most people, it's not even close to most people are in CODIS, but like a lot of, the percentage of criminals is higher, obviously. But like killers out there that killed for the first time and nothing else, there's no way to find them using CODIS. You need to do genetic genealogy on the fly.
CODIS is a depreciating asset, because as the CODIS, the earliest CODIS people were they're in the early 90s, and those people have aged out of the system. If they were, predators or murderers, they're very old now. They're not doing that anymore, hopefully. And so it's a depreciating, although valuable. But genealogy doesn't depreciate, because even if the guy ages out, his brothers, sisters age out, they have children. They have, it's only gonna, as time goes on, more people join. it's an increasing value. It's not, it will never decrease. It will never depreciate. But we have CODIS, and we do have CODIS, and we have to honor and respect that for the way the legal form of identification for 30 years. We have to use that and respect that, although I know genealogy is going to come, and be, a force in the identification process as this develops some more.
You know what you could do, Joseph, to be the pioneer in this idea that I have? All of the people that are in prison currently that have CODIS, make it the rule that each one of them, when they're immediately swabbed to get CODIS, also have to upload the GEDmatch, the kit. Could you imagine? Oh my
Absolutely.
God.
Excellent idea. I mean, it's just how do we sell it, right?
Well, you're the one, man. Look at that. Captain Joseph Murgo. Grant Hughes Investigates on YouTube. Yeah, it's probably not going to do much out there, but I think that is the answer,
I
though.
could go with the greatest investigator, yeah.
Yeah, could you imagine?
He's very cool, but I think he's pretty doggone awesome.
Oh, yeah. So
in partnership with Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick.
There you go. That would be absolutely incredible if you guys went on tour to get that done, because imagine the genetic diversity too, because you're doing it throughout the United States in every single state and all different demographics as well, and it's all being uploaded to GEDmatch for law enforcement use only, maybe. Those people, and they get included with the regular people.
Yeah, can I tell you an asterisk in history?
Oh, come on! Don't rain on the parade. It's like
no, it's absolute. No.
Okay,
it's like this, and I agree. I'm telling you why I agree, because in 2011, I went down to the Irvine Police Department to talk about doing DNA on the Golden State Killer, and while I was there, I had made a few slides to promote my new idea. I had a new idea that came up. Why not have GEDmatch at that time was a year or two old. It was very small. I said, why not get police officers, firemen, military people, DNA lab analysts, and make a GEDmatch just for them. And, that way it wouldn't matter who was in the database, because as long as it's a cross-section of America, it doesn't matter.
And that's millions of people, right? That's millions of people do that.
Right. And then I went to a police department, the next time I had a chance, and they said they didn't think it would work because the police departments would use it for contract negotiation leverage, like we'll give our DNA, but you have to give us a raise or something like that, or whatever. And then Joe's nodding his head, of course, and
union stuff. It's yeah.
And then the second agency said, that might work, but there's crooked cops too. And the Golden State Killer was a crooked cop. How about that? But I have those slides, and I can absolutely prove that happened. And there was the people in the meeting came back to me later, and I said, I saw them years later after the Golden State Killer was caught. And I said, do you guys remember that meeting? And they were laughing. Yeah, and we even wrote some notes about what happened. Anyway, it wasn't the time.
Yeah. Seems like with criminals, though, they're already doing DNA for GEDmatch, so it's just sort of a no-brainer almost. If you could get some sort of cheaper bioinformatics, sort of a streamlined version going out of that, like bulk rate type of thing. So anyways, it's just an idea.
I know, it's a good idea.
I mean, how many criminals are in the United States in prison? Probably 3 or 4 million. I mean, what? I don't even know. Probably like 5 million people, maybe something. I mean, it's some huge number, and that would just massively increase. And a lot of times, criminals' relatives are criminals too. So it's like that would almost immediately make a difference. Hey, I'm trying to sell this thing, man. It's like an idea that I've had for 2 years now.
Here's the poster children here for it works. Here's
get your DNA in the system. Period.
Yeah.
So somebody asked a question for you, Marianne, is like, what keeps you going? What keeps you fighting this whole time? I mean,
you just you got to stay motivated. I mean, I listen to a lot of music. You know, depending on the mood, I'll listen to one of my sister's favorite songs, which is like
What was that?
Mostly Simon and Garfunkel.
Oh, that's my favorite right there.
The Sound of Silence.
That's my favorite song of all time. I've said it many times on my show.
Yeah, love that song.
Yeah. That's weird.
My daughter and I were singing Pink at the top of our lungs on the way up to East Haven because it's very, very motivating. And she just released a song that's about, you know, a lost loved one as well. And my daughter does her playlists. And yes, we know. Sorry, Ash, if you're watching. Joe, you want to tell about police escort driving? We never worry about my daughter getting a speeding ticket. She was driving and she was given a police escort to the cemetery that morning so that we could visit my sister privately. And I was like, yeah, you can keep up with them. It's okay. You can keep up with them. And Captain Murgo probably had to slow down a couple times.
We were wondering why she was going so slow. She was with the police.
And I was like, it's okay. They're
the one time you could speed.
That's what I said. I said,
you weren't speeding,
okay, right. You weren't speeding, but she wasn't even keeping up with you guys.
She doesn't tailgate at all, so she's a very safe driver. Don't worry. But that motivates me. Just knowing, just knowing that anything is possible. You just can't give up. And one thing that can be very daunting is people's reactions. I encourage anybody out there that's listening, if somebody does tell you, you know, I have a missing sister, I have a missing brother, I have a missing nephew, child, parent, whatever. Number one, don't look at them like they're making it up for attention. Because that'll shut them down. And I will tell you, it is hard knowing that my sister at 18 years old was dumped in a ditch, bound.
Yeah.
It's hard. It is nothing compared to not knowing. Not knowing is a pain you can't even imagine. For the first time in the last weeks, there's a hole in my house over here, and it's got pictures on it. I call it the Wall of the Dead, because pretty much everybody on there but me is dead. And now when I go past the picture, there's a picture of, I think I sent it to you, Captain Murgo, of myself, my brother, and my sister. And there's another picture of my older brother, my sister. It was from before I was born, and my parents. Now when I go down the hall, I just go, gotcha. And you don't realize how much it is in your head, how much it is in your life, what it's done, until you're not carrying that rock anymore. Mm. And that's a lot. That is a gift I can't even begin to describe, and to think that you're so very alone. And then at the end of the road, you find out that you aren't even close to alone. There was a whole town, there's a whole bunch of people online. There's people across the country. It's just people that actually care. It's amazing to me. It's such a different kind of thing, because now when I look at the true crime things, I'm not like, oh, I wonder if that's Patricia. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I don't have to think about that anymore.
Yeah, you can actually be an advocate and give the advice to people now. You got an answer.
I would love to find a way to do that. I truly, truly would love to find a way to give people like me hope, to let people know that if it's possible for me, I'm telling you, it's possible for anyone. You know, absolutely anyone. And if somebody does come to you, tell them, hey, have you heard about GED Match? You know, there's ways that people can get that information. You know, I heard about this girl, and she looked forever, and she found her sister. So give people hope. You know, like the shirt says, okay, hope. Hope.
I'd say
hope.
Create a podcast called Tricia's Voice. And there you go. You just out there and you talk, and you know, it'd be really pretty cool. And tell people to get a hold of you. They come on your show. You go over their case with them. You know, I think it would be awesome for you. Something like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Seriously.
Yeah.
I think it's a question. I don't believe people say closure, and I don't believe in that. I believe in release. You are released from worrying and wondering and that rock and that hole that you've been carrying around for so long. You are released. Now, all of that energy you've been devoting to all of that running in place, now you can let
That's
go.
a great way to put it. Running in place.
Yeah, what Marianne just said is something that I repeat often on the show and talk to people, is that the missing persons cases are the absolute worst for the family members. You'd rather know that they died and you have them and you're able to take care of them than sitting there, because you're stuck in limbo for decades. I mean, forever, right? You're basically the ones that are never solved. You're stuck in limbo forever, and it's just sort of this chip on your shoulder that's never gone. And then finally, like you had, the knock at the door, and it must have just been overwhelming. Like this weight came falling off, and now you're on another stage trying to figure out who did it, but that's not as bad as the
That's not
missing.
as important, to be honest.
Yeah,
The who
right.
did it, yeah, I'd like to know.
Yeah,
But like I said, whoever did it, you pay the piper one way or the other. You pay the piper, but I do want to know what happened to her.
yeah.
What was doing there? You know, what did she really ever even go to boarding school? Because I only have one person's word for that, and that's highly dubious. I mean, I'm sure she probably went somewhere, but
Yeah.
where?
Well, it's interesting that she disappeared in '73 and was still moving around, because she didn't die much before she was, her body was put there, right? So
Right.
she's still, you know, a year and a half of something, whatever she was doing. I mean, there's got to be somebody.
I graduated at 17. Maybe she did. She was found 3 weeks after she turned 18.
Oh. And
You
see,
know?
it must be, see, that's a cool thing, because Joe here, Captain Joe, he actually is the one that helped free the weight off your shoulder, along with Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick up there, which only took 30 seconds because you happened to be in. I mean, that's amazing. It's absolutely incredible to me.
30
anyway.
seconds. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Colleen, how long have you been doing this?
Well, I don't know what this is, but I've been doing forensic genealogy on cold cases since 2011. And at first we could only use Y DNA, the male DNA, because that was the big deal in genealogy.
The canal
because
murders.
that's the last name.
Yeah. The Phoenix
Then,
Canal murders, right? That's the one you started with, something like that?
Yeah, no, in fact, the first case was Sarah Yarborough
Oh,
in
that's right.
Seattle in 2011. I just happened to be in Seattle for a genealogy conference, and I went a day early to talk to the Seattle Police Department about my idea using genealogy for cold cases. And I said, if you gave me the Y DNA profile from a cold case, then, you know, I could compare it to the genealogy databases like an adoptee would do, and to find the last name. And after I almost got laughed out the room there, you know, but fortunately the DNA analyst was there. Her name was Jody Sass, and she got it. She got what I was saying, and that's when the revolution started. A few months later, she said there's a case that they really are coming to me, you know, about every now and then, and next time they come, we'll connect you guys. And that's what happened. And Detective Jim Allen came to me about the Sarah Yarborough case. You can look it up. It's quite well known. And that was the first case where forensic genetic genealogy was used as an investigative lead in 2011, 7 years before the Golden State Killer. But then, you know, the technology evolved. We all know that now. And in 2015, I kept doing a Y-DNA, and that was the first case solved. That was the Phoenix Canal murders. And I want to say both of these, the Sarah Yarborough case, I testified in court last week, and that was the first time genealogy had been brought into court in a criminal case. And so the trial, the jury's going to deliberate starting on Tuesday. So that sort of, it's a historical occasion for that. The Phoenix Canal murder, the guy has already been convicted of murder, and they're thinking about a death sentence. We're in the penalty phase right now. So those two cases were key historical cases in the whole development. And then when the SNP testing, the modern type stuff started, that was 2017. And I started with Margaret Press to make the DNA Doe project. And then we did the first two cases that were solved before the Golden State Killer, two Jane Doe cases. I had actually already done one, but inside of 23andMe, it's her husband, Lori Ruff case, her husband had tested with 23andMe, her little girl tested with 23andMe, so we backed out Lori's. She was a Jane Doe, and it was a mistaken identity. She had assumed somebody else's identity, and when she died, they found out they didn't know who she was. So because her husband and her daughter had tested, I could back that out and get her on 23andMe virtually. So that was like a sort of before a preamble. And then we had two John Doe cases, Joseph Newton Chandler and Buckskin Girl, that we actually solved before the Golden State Killer. But the Golden State Killer was the one that grabbed the news because, for obvious reasons. I mean, the guy, unbelievable. So I have to tip my hat to Barbara Ray Venter for the work she did on that. As I said, I was part of the extended family with Y-DNA, but that's what really cracked the case. And the rest is history.
Y-DNA is harder, I would imagine, isn't it?
It's only the male line
right.
with the name.
Yeah.
So you can't get anything else. But that's all we had, and it was good enough to do a few cases, to crack a few of those and lead the way for the SNP testing, I would say. You open
are
the door.
What do you call yourself? The grandmother of
please.
Forensic genetic genealogy.
No.
I don't know if you can say grandmother. I don't like that term. The founder of it.
Around the no. But anyway, that you asked me, that's what since 2011, I've been trying. And Sarah Yarborough, as the technology developed, the Y-DNA, of course, led to a few things. You got to read it. It's a weird story. But it led to a few things, and then that wasn't enough. So I started tracking technology, and I had SNP testing done 6 times. As life went on and things got better, and finally in 2019, we solved it the same way we identified Tricia, because the technology, it was there, and we could do it.
Yeah. We got people in the chat thinking it's the stepmom. in your case, I don't know. Come on.
I don't think so.
Maybe
it doesn't make any sense. She was walking. She was around by herself for a year and a half, walking around. Right? I mean, like.
No. Anyway, stepmom. That sounds more like a vicious killer than a stepmom. I know that.
Yeah.
Stepmom in a variety of.
Doubt she could tie a knot that well.
And it actually matches what that other killer exactly what he did. So it's like that one sounds like the best lead you have.
Yeah, I don't think it's the stepmom. I'm sorry. Thank you though for the.
There's no way she would have been. No. What? I will say this.
No. Don't take it seriously, Marianne. Don't take it.
Yeah. It was just somebody threw it out there. They were joking. I think they're probably goofing around or something. But,
I'm just gonna say I've heard that before. Okay, that's no.
Okay.
That's
right.
No.
Let's go on to the next topic. It wasn't the.
Yeah, it was. I wanted to pick up steam in there, so I wanted.
Thank you. Appreciate that, but no. She was just not very present, and it was a difficult family situation, but she did not kill my sister.
Yeah.
Good to know.
All right. Well, do you anything else, you guys? I don't see any more questions by anybody.
No,
I might have skipped some because I was listening to what you guys were saying. Let's see. I mean, you guys have been like absolute troopers. You've been on here for 2 hours and 24 minutes, and that doesn't even include before, because you came on a half hour before the show started. That's 3. So, you know, I'm not sure. I'd like, if you have anything that you want to, you could come back on for, like there's something that develops and you feel like it would help getting it out there, then definitely come back on, all of you guys. I mean,
For sure. That'd be great.
If you need me, I will be here.
thank you.
Any last thoughts? Seriously, anybody? I
No,
don't want.
My only final thought is, again, thank you, so much for having me on, Marianne. It's been an absolute pleasure to have met you, and Dr. Fitzpatrick. It's been an absolute pleasure to have worked with you, and you know, if we can leverage sort of our experiences together and provide hope and bring some sort of closure to some other family, I would love to join forces with you again, and possibly work together if we could figure that out. That'd be great.
Thank you. And
So podcast, y'all be on it.
Okay, guys, I want to appreciate actually having to talk to you, because when we were at the press conference, we really didn't have that chance. So I appreciated, really chatting. And I know, Joe, we've been in touch over time, but we never really had a chance to talk it through and figure out, some of these details are very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you guys are all really good people too. But yeah, I think it'd be cool. Tricia's voice, isn't that already a good name? Boom.
It's a good name, and
yeah, and you can have Captain Joe can come on and sort of talk about things from time to time, and boom, boom, boom. You got other people. I think it'd be really cathartic for you too to have other people that have missing family members, and you can really sort of walk them through. Hey, you got to get people to do Jed Match, get everybody in your family to do it. Get going.
Tricia, Marianne.
You can call me Tricia. It's okay.
That should be your mission as Jed Match.
I'm saying, you're going to be a spokesperson. You're going to come into all kinds of people, going to contact you and say, oh my God, how did you do that? I'm so happy. So, if you drag them on your own podcast, drag them on the Grays, or whatever, you're a spokesperson now. You're important. You're going to do some good work with that.
Well, if I could help one other person have what I have right now, it's definitely worth going outside of my comfort zone, for sure. And,
it almost seems like your mission is a perfect mission would be to find other family members that have missing persons and make sure that they all upload the Jed Match. Those family members, because they could have already found them a long time ago. They're just not in there. Right? Yeah. So,
true. That's true. It's a partnership.
That'd be a really cool goal. Just like, bam, you're just out there, and that's kind of the deal,
So I'm going to email you, and you're going to tell me how to do this, right?
Yeah. Well, all you have to have is a mic and record something and start uploading. But yeah, we'll do it. I tell you what, we'll get the right people, and we'll figure out how to get you going. So send me an email. All right. You want to do like the audio version, right? Or do you want to do like podcast is audio? You could do something like this too, but. Whatever works for you. How about that?
Whatever works. Whatever gets the job done and gets people in there and gets their DNA in the system so that they can find people too.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. But listen.
And I really appreciate you giving us this opportunity as well. It means a whole lot.
Well, it's my pleasure. I mean, it's amazing. What's that?
All it takes is one person seeing her face. Like, hey, I knew her.
Yeah, well, I mean, this whole show was really interesting to me and really amazing. So it was absolutely my pleasure to have you guys on. So, maybe we'll have some occasion to do something again in the future. But I appreciate it. And you guys should all be absolutely proud of yourself, every single one of you. And there's other people on the side also that should be proud, but they're not here right now. So, good job.
And I want to give a shout to Linda Doyle, who is the genealogist forensic. She, of course, she did a great job. She couldn't join us tonight, but she did a great job.
Well, there you go. Boom.
One day I'm going to meet her.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Awesome. One day I'm going to meet her. Yeah.
Right?
yeah.
Right.
And if I get any information sent to me for the ring or something, I did find. One last question. What is Sicilian? Is that like the Italian sort of thing, or is it
Saint
like a
Cecilia,
okay?
a Catholic.
All right, because it was weird. I typed it in. There was these rings with the blue stone in it and stuff like that. But I'm sure you've seen those. They just didn't say Sicilian on it. But wow, somebody's going to get the answer for you on that one. I bet you. So.
I bet.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for being here.
I've been rolling really good so far on this. So.
Oh, cool. And get something to eat. You look like you're kind of hungry there, Joe. All right, man. Hey, have a good one. Thanks for being here.
Thank you guys so much. I
It
appreciate
was
it.
great.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. See you later.
Fantastic. Nice
Bye.
talking to you guys.
Okay,
Soon.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Record.
All right. God, wasn't that awesome, you guys? I mean, that was. See, and it's crazy too because. I mean, it's not bad. We have like 250 watching, but normally, you'd think you'd have 400 and 500 people watching. It's amazing. Like that's so much more interesting than so much of the crap that we see out there.
To find her. A big thumbs up.
Let's see. Let me move that down. Is that? There you go. Got that chat behind the dog screen. Yeah, Cecilia Academy. It's weird. When I looked it up, I was looking at stuff like this right here. I mean, as soon as I typed it in, look at these things. They sort of look like what she was wearing. It seems like you should really. This is 1953 class ring. Just wonder if there's something in here. Somebody's going to find it. It should be fun. 1953, okay? Go out and find that ring. Anyways, what do you guys think of that? I thought that was one of the best shows we've ever had on this topic. That was freaking awesome. It's great to have, Captain Joseph on there and Marianne and Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick. Amazing. Thank you, Traveling Teresa. Oh, look at this back. We got it's playing again now. Yeah, I mean, there's really no proof that she went to a boarding school, except somebody said that she went there. But the thing is this. So after she left the house in 73, she was still out and about doing things. Okay? And then ends up that a killer who had killed somebody in the same general area, very similar, exactly the same knots and everything. That person was arrested and then died, I think he said, what was it, 1980 or something? So that other person is probably more likely the killer, right? I mean, they bound and tied the person, their victim up exactly the same way. And I think his name was Glenn Askborn. So that's what makes it the stepmom not really part of it. Yeah. Yeah, so that was pretty good. Well, I hope you guys didn't think it was like totally boring the way I do it. See, that's how I do shows. I don't sit there with a script with notes or something. I just learned about what was going on, and I knew about all the stuff about the grave and how they had to look for her body a second time. and all that stuff and the whole story. So then when I'm sitting here, I can just talk as if I'm aware instead of like looking at notes. I just have a conversation with people. Some people are, you know, I don't know. Some people, I don't think anybody dislikes the way I do these interviews, to be honest with you.
From that school.
There, I put the blob on my face. But it's not 1953. You actually own one of those? I mean, you happen to have an exact ring from the same, like a ring from that same school? Or you found it out there? Yeah. That was a crazy night. So Zozo helped me figure out how to get the... Like, she sent me a video, and I had thought of this before, but I wasn't sure, because I think what I looked up was, can I stream on my one computer to 2 different live streams? But I have a second computer, which is another instance of OBS Studio, and so you can have multiple streams going on as long as you have the, you know, obviously you have to put the different stream key in. So my next show, I'm sort of nervous because I've kept using the same stream key over and over and over and over again. So the next show that I load up, if I don't remember to put the stream key in, it just starts streaming. You guys remember when I've done that before, where I hit the stream button and it's live and everybody's like, what's going on? There's nothing going on. There's nothing going on. Because it uses the generic video settings. Well, thanks, Danielle. You sent one what? Oh, hold on, I'm gonna... Let's see, oh, thank you to Ashley H, I guess. I don't know if she has her last name out there. Thank you very much on Cash App. And then we had some, well, today we have Paulette Leonard.
Great show. I got my notebook today.
Tracy.
I love it.
Oh, really? Cool. I won't say her name. She doesn't want me to say her name. Very generous one from Charleston Amy, who's still out there. It's awesome. Paulette Leonard and Your Gypsy and Lillian. So thank you, Lillian, if you're still out there. You said you sent me something, though. I don't know what that means. Like, where is it? What is it? Oh, this one keeps popping up. Yeah, it's blue, it has a blue stone, so that's not the one. Yeah. Here, let me show you the picture again for you guys. Let's see. Not that one. Hold on, I'll load up. Let me load up that picture that was sent to me by the captain there. Hold on. All right, let me load it up for you guys. Here we go, the middle monitor, and here it is, and it's down here. So you can kind of tell there's like a darker, almost either blue or purple-y looking stone with sort of a silver-ish looking. I mean, it's better to look at it from a distance like that, you know, because if I zoom in too far like this is what YouTubers, oh my God, look at that, it's a face. That's somebody's ear. Look at that. It got a lot of earwax in there, and they're look right here. You can see it. Oh wait. Oh, it's a ring on somebody's finger. Okay. Yeah. So you never want to get too zoomed in. These people do that a lot. So there it is. Apparently that's the ring. I wonder what this is. Is that like an apartment complex or? What am I looking at, Danielle? I only want people to use that really when, unless I happen to say, look at, or you're trying to get me to see something that I missed. Because nowadays when people type in 4 look-ats, I'm looking around for what I might have missed. Who? Oh yeah, I was just showing what people do a lot on social media, YouTube channels. They like to zoom in on pixels, and it's no different than what do you call it? What is that called? Spirit box. You know, there's a certain point where you can start claiming anything when you're zoomed in, and people go, "Oh yeah, I see it. You know, I see it there. I see it." Okay, you guys. Well, I think that's going to do it. Long day again today. Sitting around, just waiting around for the Letitia Stout trial. Absolutely nuts. We had some bad intel that said, "Oh God, they're coming back with a verdict, Gray, in a half hour." I wonder, was I being punked on that one? Turns out that wasn't true, and it's really bad news that the jury wasn't able to come up with a verdict in those 4 or 5 hours they were in there, because that Letitia Stout case is a slam dunk. I'll actually say this: if there's a holdout of any kind, they are probably one of the dumbest people on the planet. That case is so obvious and clear. There is no chance that Letitia Stout has a mental illness where she is insane. There is zero chance whatsoever. And so when you put that together and you think, God, there's somebody out there that bought into some of that stuff. Wow. So anyways, I'm not sure what we do on Monday. Do I come on at, early in the morning and see what happens? Or like, what do they do? I guess I'll try to be up at 7:30 again, see what happens. All right, so thank you to Plato in here, Scoutin' Dude with 2 cat eye donations in a row, then One Sly Angel, Candalee Woodward Stone, Kathy Chapman, and then Scoutin' Dude with a double cat eye. And so this is what I was talking about. There's some nights where, like, if somehow Scoutin' Dude wasn't here, it would have been really low, but it turned out good because he was here. So thank you, Scoutin' Dude, for making a good night. Juju Positive, and everybody that's helping is helping, but what I'm saying is there's goal numbers, and that's what made it to that. It was doubled just from him. It's pretty wild, you don't see that too often. So anyways, we got Juju Positive, Danielle, Eugenie, Scoutin' Dude again, Lisa Murphy, Ashley Snow, Ben Hills, Plato, Danielle, Scoutin' Dude, Danielle, Regina Carter, Cindy J, Traveling Teresa, and Charisma. And we had one Loving the Sun 100 new channel member. How about I give out channel memberships tonight instead of a spin? Do you guys mind? You guys mind if I do that? Anybody? If I give out do a spin and for, like give out 5 memberships, something like that? Would you guys be okay with that? I'll take that as a yes. You guys mind if I do that? And my nose isn't quite as plugged. It's still a little bit. Okay. Where is that? It's over here, right there. Boom. And memberships. And oops. No, I almost signed up for a membership. All right. There we go. And should be good. Are they coming in now? Here we go. Bing, bing, bing. All right, let's see if there's anybody here. Probably everybody in here is... What happens if there isn't anybody in here? And does it revert to the next day? Or like, how does that work? Oh, look, we got 15 Lee. Used to be a member here. Daphne. L, or I think it's L. Betty Smith and Bullseye. All right. Hopefully none of you are trolls. Yeah, I thought there'd be a verdict in 2 hours. Have their lunch, call it a day, get a verdict, get home for the weekend, and relax. But that did not happen. They may have said simply, they all agreed, but let's take the weekend in case somebody thinks of something different, because this is somebody's life, and they're going to come back on Monday, vote one last time, and boom. I mean, that's definitely a possibility. Then I won't think any, harsh. I can see doing something like that, sitting around going, this is for somebody's rest of their life here. We all have voted guilty. Why don't we take the weekend to see if there's happens to be anything else, like the justice system deserves it or whatever. And we'll come back in, we'll vote again, and if we're still there, we'll put in the guilty verdict, okay? I think it could be something like that. But anyways, I thought that was so awesome. So thanks again for Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, Marianne, Collette, and Captain Joseph M. Murgo. He's really cool dude too. You can tell. I mean, who's ever got him. The East Haven Police Department is lucky to have him running the show there. Yeah, but let's say you buy 5 memberships and it gives out 2 of them, because let's say you only had 8 people watching and just so happens, does it save the other 3 for another time? Yeah, I'm kind of wondering about that. So, anyways, thank you guys very much for being here and supporting the channel all the way on both shows today. Another long one. Special thanks there to Scout and Dude for tonight. I appreciate it. But really, everybody out there supporting the channel, it's great. Good stuff. Let's see. If she found not guilty and insane, it would be a travesty. If she's found insane, that means there's stupid people on that jury. And that means a lot of stupid people. The best odds of something bad is a hung jury on that. That's it. Okay? And they will try her again. There's no doubt about it. And the defense will probably find a better psychologist, but I don't think anybody's willing to sell their soul to try to help Letitia and come up with a fake diagnosis. But anyways, thank you guys again for being here, and thanks to the guests, and really good show. And we will see you tomorrow at some point. Maybe we'll do. Well, I'm going to try to play golf or something tomorrow, even though haven't been able to. I've been sort of inactive. I was thinking of maybe playing. I don't know how it would work, but I might be able to get a Jodi Arias day running while I'm gone or something like that. But I don't know how that would work, because I'd be gone for like 5 or 6 hours. Maybe if I can put 2 back to back. I'm not sure how that works. If it skips over to the next one, I'll look into it. Yeah, it won't be here. It would just play by itself. And watch the audio quits working halfway through, and it just sits there and plays for 4.5 hours of no audio. That'd be awesome, wouldn't it? Yeah. Okay, we'll see you guys tomorrow. And as I always say, everybody, until next time, be safe out there. And a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 5 and a 6 and a 7. And that's right, you guys. We do those same types of cases on our own.
Now.
We got stuff in the pipeline.
And during this
here.
whole time, I have not seen one person that is a crime dissector, flag projector. I'm a certified human lie detector. Gonna get ya on a stretcher if you try and play me like an old projector. Crime sector is my nectar. Professor Grader's gonna give another lecture. Crime collector, freak connector, and I'm always gonna be a pup protector. Fool deflector, interceptor. And I'm meaner than a spectre with a vector on his pector. With all respect, y'all, just remember I've a temper fucking check ya. I have no agenda, I'm no pretender, and I'll serve it to you straight without the blender. And in the end, I'm gonna send ya on a mission to reveal the true offender. Yeah, so I'll just get right back to work. All right, everybody? Talk to you later.
It's a monkey, Grant. It's a monkey. Look, it's a monkey, Grant. I see eyeballs in a mouth. Did you see that monkey, Jay?
Yes, Mary Lou, I saw the monkey. Although it wasn't a monkey, it was clearly a rock. I think you're using pareidolia.
What do you mean pareidolia?
Ah, forget it. Jesus. Okay. Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow night sometime. But if I can figure out something, it's kind of early, I can load up maybe days 6 and 7 at the same time on the... And you guys can just watch, if you feel like it, through the day over there off the other computer. And that way I don't have to do a damn thing. All right? You can just watch it. Although I kind of want to watch, want to listen to it myself. Maybe let's do something else. All right, guys. Thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow. And as I always say, until next time, be safe out there.
Be safe out there, everybody.
Wow, that was so positive sounding of you. You didn't go, good night, everybody. Gee, like you always do.
Well, I could have done that, Grant. Let me do it. Good night, everybody. Gee.
That had a little extra oomph to it that time. You know what I'm saying? All right. See you guys later. And as I always say, until next time, be safe out there.